What's up, everybody? It's Soren Baker here on Unique Access Entertainment. As always, please hit that subscribe button. It's right down there and it's free. That enables us to keep coming to y'all as often as possible with as many interviews as possible. Now, today, we have the honor and privilege of being joined by Ron Amun-Ra Lawrence. Thank you for coming through, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man.
Appreciate
Long
appreciate
time,
it.
long time fan. Got to meet Ron recently at the DC Hip Hop Honors event. That was pretty amazing and full circle in a lot of ways because been following Ron. Definitely, if you guys don't have his book yet, definitely pick it
Mhm.
up. It's available worldwide. Where I'm from, growing up, hip hop, a lot of great information in there. Yes,
Growing up in hip hop.
growing up in hip hop.
Right.
So check the cover again if you haven't already. I'll pick it up a couple times so you guys can see it. But definitely, I would highly recommend. If you don't have the book, definitely get it. It's a lot of great story, not only with Ron's story, but
Mm.
rap in general. Um, so one thing I wanted to get from you, Ron, is because I had a lot of interesting things when I was reading this, like your idea of going from the spectator to participant is when you heard the Grandmaster Flash tape you talk about in your book. So, being that you had been around things, heard so much stuff, what was it about that tape in particular that kind of transformed your mentality and your mindset?
That was the first time I heard somebody uh cutting up a break, like just religiously back and forth. It was Catch a Groove. And somebody in the neighborhood had to tape. This goes back to like 1979.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and he had a box, and we were asking like, "What's the name of What's the name of that record?" He's cutting. Yeah, and I just remember that. That's kind of what sparked me to spark my interest, right? But I've seen things prior to that from a disco perspective. Growing up in East Amherst, Queens, we had a lot of jams in the parks and stuff. They did things a little different, and they did catch the break, but it was more, records like Bob Skaggs, "Dirty Lowdown." If you remember that record, there's like a little intro at the beginning. So I can remember things as early as a little kid, maybe like 1977, and hearing that.
Hmm. Okay. And that since you had been seeing stuff for years also, did you know that the DJing and what he was doing was different or similar in ways to what you'd been seeing in Queens?
Well, see what it was is as I got old, when I first saw it when I was young, that I wasn't really interested in doing. I was too young to really understand what it was. I was more into uh, drawing and playing outside and doing martial arts and stuff like that. But it wasn't until I got to junior high school and then hearing that the beat tape will catch a groove with flash cutting and scratching sparked my interest. So that's when I wanted to do it.
Okay.
And
And
then we
then,
heard flashes on the beatbox. And they were actually they were I think it was Flash and the Furious Five, and they were harmonizing over a beatbox.
hmm,
Yeah, those
yeah,
flashes on the beatbox. And they actually singing. They weren't rhyming, but they were singing. It was dope.
well, that's one of the thing about the early routines that I always thought was
Mhm.
strange a little bit later when people started quote unquote criticizing rappers that had singing in their music. Because I was like, all the classic routines with all the groups, they harmonize almost all. They harmonized,
Mhm.
if not
Oh
all
yeah.
of them. So
Just about just Treacherous Three,
Cold Crush.
Fantastic Five, Cold Crush, they all did it. If you had a crew, you was harmonizing.
So why do you think a little bit later it was such a stigma? Because singing has always been such an integral part of rap. Why do you
Mhm.
think at times people have criticized it when it's ironically a foundational part of the culture as well?
I think when you look at hip hop from its inception, there were no the only rules we had was biting. Like you couldn't bite somebody's rhyme or whatever. But when it came to the music, there was really no type of differentiation when it came to certain things, right? But it's not until later, I think, as hip hop started to grow and the music started to change, and then they started to strip down some of the music, and then it became like just beats and rhymes, Then it was just like, okay, this is hardcore. And I think as times went on, we moved away from the party stuff. We moved away from the good times and having fun, and everything was just about being serious. And the seriousness to me is where you kind of they started drawing the line about, okay, now you can't be singing because hip hop is about being serious at this point, right? So you got N.W.A, you got all these other guys. Everything is hardcore. You can't possibly be singing. I think the generation after didn't get that lesson that the generation before did, but we understood it because we witnessed it. But I think the generation that came after, they got the rawness of the hardcore flavor of hip hop, which they didn't get to see or hear stuff like King's People Play and songs like even Curtis Blow singing "Daydreaming." He had a ballad on his album. I think even Sugar Hill Gang sang on the album too.
Well, that
Crash Crew is harmonizing. Don't quit to be quitting, start to be stopping. Keep moving, just keep on rocking. We'll be rocking on your radio, right? Now, these dudes were harmonizing. They were sounding crazy back then. It just added flavor to the music. That's what it was.
But I think to your point, and the irony of it all is like Curtis Blow, for instance, with Hard Times that Run-DMC covered later. I mean, he had the breaks and all these songs were, it's more festive and fun, but he also had Hard Times, which Run-DMC later made more famous, of course. But I just always thought it was strange that while these different things were happening, that there was given that rap and hip hop was so inclusionary that it also was so exclusionary, strangely at the
Mhm.
same time.
All
So,
right. Yeah,
yeah,
it's growth, change. Yeah.
right. Okay. And with the DJing in particular, I thought it was interesting in your book how you told the story about how your brother was telling you that you were trying to cut and scratch wrong because you were too heavy on the vinyl. Um, s- so
Yeah, yeah. See, back the older DJs, they did it a lot different because you couldn't touch the vinyl because they were into protecting the record. You couldn't put oil on the vinyl. You couldn't put fingerprints. You couldn't. None of that stuff could touch the vinyl. So everything was done on the edge of the vinyl or maybe on the label. And this is what I knew growing up, just watching my brother because he was a park DJ, right? And park and also in the clubs and stuff like that. But as kids going into the next generation watching Flash, they used cheaper turntables. They didn't use the SL was 1100s and the SL 1200s. Those turntables were more expensive. So the older DJs, like the disco DJs and the club DJs, that's what they used. The younger DJs were using turntables they couldn't afford. So we came in with the SLB ones, the SLD ones, the belt drives and stuff like that. So those turntables, they weren't made for um, that hardcore turntable use that you could do on the SL 1100s and 1200s. So if you're trying to spin, backspin, and do all that other stuff on those turntables, the needle's going to jump. You can do that on the 1200s because those are stronger made turntables. We didn't know that. So we were putting quarters on top of the needle, and we were putting our fingerprints on the vinyl, and the weight of the quarter on the needle would destroy the grooves. The grooves would eventually turn white, and not taking care of these records, we would destroy them. We didn't know until when you go like 15, 20 years later, we realized the older generation, they had it right. So now you see the DJs cutting the day. Nobody's putting their fingers on the vinyl. They're cutting on the label now, right? And they're protecting the records. And they're cutting on SL 1100s and 1200s. So had we known or studied, I think the older generation, it would have been a lot easier. But then again, we couldn't afford the turntables, so I get it.
hmm,
So there
okay.
was kind of there was a I think there was like a gap between when it came to equipment. with the young and the older generation. And you're talking like maybe it wasn't even like a big age difference. You're talking maybe somebody that was 20 years old opposed to somebody that was 15. Because hip hop was young. So if you're 20 at that back in the late 70s, early 80s, you probably wasn't even doing hip hop. You probably was going to Bentleys or something like that.
Right.
Or maybe sneaking in the disco, was it Studio 54?